Why is it not crashing? That's the question everyone seems to be asking around the United States. From January 2023 to now, the US housing market has experienced one of the most turbulent rides of all time. Despite 8% interest rates and crashing demand numbers, the market seems to be an unstoppable force that simply refuses to collapse. But just as frustration boils over and buyers begin throwing in the towel, new evidence is emerging that seems to be hinting at a final catalyst. The one thing that will eventually rip away the floor from this overheated market. You see, right now, we're in the middle of what I call the Great Paradox. A unique situation has developed because of a wild story that started back in 2011. You see, after the United States experienced the Great Recession, the housing market did something it had not done for close to 100 years. It collapsed for the first time since the Great Depression in 1929. For many decades, it was strongly believed that housing was simply indestructible, a fortress that couldn't be brought down. From 1940 to 2008, despite dozens of recessions, world wars, and multiple crises, home prices either stood steady or rose up. In 2008, this immunity from price falls was shattered, shocking nearly all economists and investors. And the response was simple. That time was different. 2008 can never happen again, and all the conditions that led to it were patched. And this is where the disagreement is. Today, YouTubers, real estate agents, investors, experts, and economists firmly stand on one of two sides. Those that believe that housing is indestructible, and those that look at a chart like this and say something has to give. The bears at the end of the day have a simple argument that is rather indisputable. We can sit here and analyze dozens of charts, hundreds of data points, and millions of opinions, but ultimately all things boil down to the simple law of regression. And this chart here is the golden tablet for all arguments related to future crashes. This is the real home price, a chart that shows home prices adjusted for inflation. And as you can see, real home prices are unquestionably far beyond the normal 100-year average. Now from here, the argument can take one of two directions. You can say that something is going to take home prices down to the long-term average, or you can choose the bull argument and say that this is the new normal, but ultimately, by arguing the new normal argument, you are going against 120 years of data. Essentially, by choosing the bull path, you are acknowledging that in the future, homes are going to be strictly for the rich, and no normal American will be able to afford a home unless they inherit it. Why do I say this? Well, that's just the plain reality. Take for an example an average household in a typical cheap US state like Ohio. I'm not even going to go to California or New York to make my argument. I'm going with one of the cheapest options in the nation, and as you will see, the reality is still quite absurd. A typical household in Ohio, according to the American Community Survey, makes around $62,000 per year. Now, if we put that number into a tax estimator, you can see that for a family of four, the real net income they would receive for that $62K is around $47,000. This number breaks down to essentially $4,000 a month. Now let's look at home prices and do some simple math. According to the National Association of Realtors, the median home price for the Cleveland metro area is $228,700. At today's interest rates, taxes, and insurance costs, the mortgage for such a home would be around $1,835 per month. And that's for a 30-year mortgage with a 20% down payment of $46,000. So for a typical Ohio family, the typical home would cost them around 45% of their income. That is nearly 2 times the amount that most personal finance experts recommend. And given the costs of the down payment, the repairs you would have to complete, and the increasing costs of utilities, the reality is clear. The average home is unaffordable for the typical family, even in the most affordable states. People just do not have the money to pay these absurd prices, and until there is a fix via a price crash, what we will end up with is a frozen market where transactions are coming in at record lows. The MBA index, which measures the number of people applying for residential mortgages, is hitting numbers that we never believed were possible. Right now, it's at 127, and it just keeps pushing down, far below even the 2008 crash era. What this means is the actual number of buyers and sellers is plunging, and this is simply due to the fact that nobody can afford a home. Sure, it's true that demand is matching supply right now, with both being extremely low, but what I'm trying to display with this information right here is that the foundation has been stripped. Right now, the market is operating with very few pillars, and it's doing fine because the number of homes on top is also extremely low. But we are one event away from a rapid supply shift, and it wouldn't take much to completely break those pillars, holding up what is America's largest housing bubble. However, it's important to know that before that can happen, we still may have more pain ahead. The housing freeze may just have to get worse before we see significant price reductions. There are plenty of experts who believe that despite the number of transactions plummeting and new listings falling off the chart, we still have some ways to go before we can call a bottom. Sean Dobson, the CEO of Lambert, one of the largest institutional holders of residential real estate, made this clear in his recent interview with Lambert. He was quoted saying, "I don't think new listings are close to bottoming out." Remember, this is a man who is responsible for over 40,000 homes throughout the United States, and he doesn't believe that the freeze is close to a bottom. In order for prices to truly feel pain, we need new listings to begin an upward trend, and right now there seems to be a general consensus that we still have a ways to go before this number finally bottoms out. Once it does, that's when the real panic begins to set in, and the investors and economists who claim the price correction is impossible will suddenly realize that the market isn't as strong as it was once believed. It's already clear that price growth throughout the nation, even in the hottest markets, is essentially done. Prices have flattened out, and now they are struggling to push for new highs as the affordability ceiling has been reached. As pressure from rates begins to wear down the economy, this chart here will eventually succumb to this pressure, fed by slowing earnings data, unemployment, and all the other things that go with a high interest rate environment specifically engineered by our Federal Reserve with the intended goal of slowing down the economy. Just like last time, these things do not happen overnight. It's a slow-moving cycle that is pushed to a breaking point, but once that point is reached, the same pace we experienced on the upside can and will be experienced on the downside, bringing real prices in line with the 130-year average. Thank you guys for watching. As always, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments what you think of this mean reversion theory.